Standing at the center of the Schuman roundabout in Brussels, one is surrounded by symbols of Europe and Belgium. Many of them are imposing and dominate the skyline, while some of them are mere clues into the past that are easily overlooked. If you face west, two iconic buildings loom large in your view at either side. To your right is the headquarters of the European Commission, with its 4 wings emanating in different directions from a central core. And to your left, the Europa building, where the summits of the 27 national leaders take place, with its external wooden frame made from oak trees from all over Europe, and its huge glass lantern on the inside. Turn around to face east, and your attention is grabbed not by what looms large at either side of you, but by what is off in the distance, the famous triumphal arch built to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Belgium's independence. It is the central piece at the heart of the Cinquantenaire Park, one of the largest and most popular parks in Brussels. If you lower your sight and refocus to the entrance of the park, you will just be able to make out the silhouette of a man's head and shoulders. As you get closer, you will gradually see that it is a life-sized bust of a man with a round, bald head, wearing a waistcoat, a suit and tie, and an overcoat. Located just between the 2 entrances, where a steady stream of workers, cyclists, pedestrians, and families enter and exit the park every day, rarely giving the bust much more than a glance, some of them will know that it represents Robert Schuman himself, one of the founding fathers of the European Union. What few people know is the story of the artist who sculpted the bust. His story is one of the symbols of Europe that are so easily overlooked when standing at the Schuman roundabout. And yet, in some ways, it is perhaps the most powerful symbol of all of them, and one which underpins European integration itself. I'm Sean O'Kernean, and this is Letter from Brussels, written for the members of the Liberal Mayors Network and any other interested listeners, and brought to you by the Renew Europe Group in the European Committee of the Regions. I first met Hans in March 2010 in Cadiz, southwestern Spain, for the 200th anniversary of the opening of the Special Congress that drafted Spain's first liberal constitution, the first time the word liberal was used in a political document. He was there as president of Liberal International, and in subsequent years, in his role as member of the European Parliament and then as president of the European Liberal Party, ALDE, I learnt that behind a sometimes serious disposition there was a kind, jolly, and profoundly caring person. After our first encounter, there followed 10 years of collaboration and friendship, including a few occasions when he took a moment from his busy schedule to offer a few words of mentorship. A few days ago, on Friday the 30th of April, we woke up to the news that Hans van Baalen had passed away due to a short illness. The news came as a shock, and our thoughts immediately turned to his wife and young son, and to the staff of the ALDE party who worked so closely with him. Tributes have poured in from all over Europe and beyond, recognizing his rich legacy contributing to a united Europe and strengthening liberalism around the world. European Commission Executive Vice President Margrethe Vestager said of him that he never put himself first, but always the team. And that's how I will mostly remember Hans, deploying, time and time again, one of the most important qualities a politician can have, the ability and instinct to build bridges and make everyone feel included. Rest in peace, Hans. The unmistakable sound of ocean waves. For most of us, this is the sound we hear that separates us, on dry land, from the open seas. In 1997, for one extraordinary woman, it was the sound that connected her back to dry land after sailing around the world in the toughest extreme ocean sailing race, the Vendée Globe, which requires competitors to sail from the northwestern coast of France down the Atlantic, circle around the Antarctic, and make their way back up the Atlantic. Cathérine Chabaud became the first woman to ever achieve that after 180 days at sea, solo, non-stop, and without assistance, overcoming life-threatening situations, swinging from moments of utter despair to feeling blissfully at one with the ocean and planet Earth, and finally experiencing 35 days with no form of communication with anyone due to a technical fault. 3 years later, she embarked on the competition once again, but she was so shocked by the amount of litter she observed in the oceans, she decided to take on a new challenge. Today, Cathérine Chabaud is a member of the European Parliament for the Renew Europe group, and she was a guest speaker at the plenary of the Committee of the Regions on the occasion of the COR's report on the protection of the marine environment. She explained that because the oceans feed off the rivers that run down the mountains and across land, all regions have a responsibility for the protection of the oceans. In fact, in 2018, Cathérine Chabaud launched an appeal calling for the oceans to be declared a common good of humanity, so that they can be protected and their use regulated, and that everyone's responsibilities towards the oceans are clearly understood and fulfilled. To date, the appeal has been signed by nearly 8,000 people. It can be found at www.oceanascommon, all one word, .org. The preservation of the marine landscape and marine life was also a concern in the report presented at the plenary by Gunnar Ansiņš, deputy mayor of the Latvian city of Liepāja, who argued that when permissions are granted for offshore energy installations, the impact on the biodiversity must be taken into consideration and minimized. And this will be all the more important as the demand for offshore renewable energy increases. In fact, Gunnar Ansiņš highlights this as a new area of business growth for ports, which can position themselves as key partners in the assembly, production, and maintenance of offshore installations. But the main concern of his report focused on the continuity of electricity supply in the EU and the need to ensure that critical infrastructure can operate continuously in all regions. When the EU still imports 58% of its energy needs, mostly in the form of oil and gas, then ensuring energy independence and stability in the system will require improvements in local storage capacity and developing quality interconnections between the grids throughout the European Union. And such an energy transition, he adds, has become even more necessary with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has demonstrated the need for a more sustainable society and economy. If the pandemic has demonstrated the need for the energy transition, it has also forced us overnight into a transition that had been on the horizon but was slow in coming, and that is the transition to a digital society. Arguably, nowhere has the impact been bigger than in the field of education. Councillor Gillian Coughlan of Cork County Council in Ireland, author of a report on the Digital Education Action Plan, explained that the pandemic has shone a light on the home lives of pupils, and it has revealed who has a quiet space to study and who doesn't, who has the necessary hardware and who does not. And because digital education is here to stay, Councillor Coughlan calls on all levels of government and the private sector to facilitate the provision of digital infrastructure, devices, and educational platforms and apps. But she also warns against these new technologies replacing in-person education, because human interaction is crucial to the well-being and development of students. As the pandemic has shown, looking to the future is not an easy task, and that is why the European Union has launched a major initiative to discuss directly with the citizens what and how the Union should be in the coming decades. Former Liberal leader in the European Parliament, Guy Verhofstadt, who is one of the co-chairs of the new Conference on the Future of Europe, explained that it will be much more than a listening exercise. It will be a truly inclusive dialogue with citizens, and their concerns and proposals will be given a political answer at the end of the conference in a year's time. Making the connection with the citizens in a lasting way is a challenge that must be resolved once and for all, said Renew Europe President François de Coster, mayor of the French city of Saint-Omer. And he calls on local councils all around the Union to appoint one of their councillors to be responsible, now and in the future, for being the main liaison with the EU for their local citizens, receiving information from the Union, monitoring events of relevance to the local council, participating in networks at local, regional, national, and European level, and communicating the views of their citizens. De Coster and Verhofstadt were speaking at events to mark the launch of the conference that took place on Europe Day, 9th of May. Europe Day is sometimes called Schuman Day. Robert Schuman was one of the founding fathers of the European Union. A brave politician who suffered imprisonment by the Gestapo and narrowly escaped being deported to a Nazi concentration camp, he was determined that Europeans would never have to suffer such horrors again. His Schuman Declaration of the 9th of May 1950 set Europe on the path to peace and union. Robert Schuman is remembered by the bust at the entrance of the Cinquantenaire Park, just off the large, plaza-sized roundabout which is named after him. Placed in its own small, beautifully kept garden, it's a life-sized bust, in a grey, which is almost black, placed on a pedestal, at the foot of which are the words, Avenir de l'Europe, the future of Europe. Only people passing on the south side of it and deliberately looking at the pedestal will notice the name of the sculptor, Nat Neujean. And it is these 10 discreetly placed letters that are perhaps the most powerful symbol of Europe of all those that can be found in and around the Schuman roundabout. Nat was born in the Flemish city of Antwerp in 1923 to Polish parents who had initially intended to emigrate to the United States. From an early age, Nat showed a keen interest in sculpture, and at the age of 14 he started work as an apprentice sculptor. But a few years later, on the 10th of May 1940, the Nazis occupied Belgium. Within 10 days, their troops had taken control of Antwerp, and the young Nat was forced to wear the yellow star, identifying him publicly as a Jew. Within months, he was expelled from the Antwerp Academy where he had been studying sculpture because of his religion. Nat made his way to Brussels, where he joined the resistance. Several times he narrowly escaped arrest and deportation, but he was not spared from tragedy. His father, his 3 sisters, and 1 brother were all deported to Auschwitz. None of them survived. Nat Neujean stayed in Brussels after the war and became a well-known sculptor in Belgium, dying only recently in 2018. Nat Neujean was in fact not his real name. After fleeing to Brussels because of the Nazi persecution and fearing for his life, he changed it. The name that Nat was given at birth, and which he should have been able to carry proudly throughout his 95 years, was Abraham Nathan Neumann. Many people say that European integration goes from crisis to crisis. That is one way of looking at it. But knowing Europe's history of conflict after conflict, every 9th of May, every Europe Day that comes and goes, in which people in Europe can keep their names without fear and can exercise their freedoms in peace, is a triumph. Indeed, as some would see it, underneath all the cacophony, European integration has been quietly going from triumph to triumph. The 21st century brings with it a range of new and daunting challenges. Those 10 letters on the pedestal underneath the bust of Robert Schuman symbolize the resilience, the humanity, and the determination that Europeans will need in order to face those challenges together and to continue on the path of European Union.